please welcome to the Oakland County MegaCast Brian Calley. He's the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule. I would imagine your phone has been ringing off the hook for a few days now.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time just getting to the bottom of what's happening, and we know the executive orders were made unenforceable, but there's still a ton of considerations that businesses have to make before they make changes, and so it has been a busy time. I really appreciate the invitation to come on the show.
So, where do things stand right now? We're hearing the Supreme Court made its decision. The governor is saying it doesn't take effect for 21 days. Other people are saying, no, burn your mask now. What are you telling the small businesses? What should
Well,
they be doing?
there's a difference between what is absolutely required by law and at the moment and what is advisable to do. The executive orders themselves have been made unenforceable, so they still exist. They're still out there, but they don't. There's no enforcement capacity behind them. The governor's original statement, I think they've kind of backtracked from the confidence that they remained in effect for 21 days, and the attorney general seemed to agree that really they become unenforceable immediately by announcing that they would not be enforcing out of the attorney general's office either. However, one thing that businesses need to keep in mind is that under existing MIOSHA laws, there still is a general duty obligation to provide a safe work environment free from hazards that are likely to cause serious injury or death. And under that obligation, it means that you can't just disregard that there's a pandemic. So what we have recommended businesses do is to look to the federal OSHA guidance here in the interim. We know some additional orders are going to happen out of state government. Some already have. There will be more today and tomorrow probably. There's going to be new rule sets that come out of MIOSHA, the Worker Safety Division of state government. And even though some of those, there's going to be some arguments about that, there's going to be some challenges probably to some of those things, that a safe place to operate is with the federal OSHA rules in terms of keeping your workplace, your workers safe, and making sure that you comply with that general duty obligation. And plus, it's just good business to make sure that your employees and your customers stay safe when they're doing business with you. And so that's why it's important that even without the executive orders, to still make sure that you're following the generally accepted protocols and the guidance to control for the epidemic and the pandemic that exists here in our state, especially within the boundaries of your business that you own.
I think the confusion comes in over the weekend. We saw a flurry of orders coming out of health departments. Here in Oakland County, it was one of the first counties to initiate the mask mandate, but then it was followed up with the state, so now the county goes away. But then you have federal rules and regulations as well, and I think that's where so much of the confusion comes in. Should they be following their local orders from a health department or the states or a federal?
Well, you have to pay attention to all three levels. And while some of the authorities are in dispute, I think it would be unadvisable to ignore any of them. We know that at the federal level that they have guidelines. They've been promulgated into rules, but they have guidelines that are generally accepted across the board. I've not seen anybody really say those guidelines are out of line, at least when it comes to the CDC protocols and the OSHA guidelines for what happens in a workplace. So from that standpoint, I think following those is a pretty safe place to operate. I think the health departments that moved quickly to initiate their own ordinances or emergency orders, were probably a bit premature on doing that because it was pretty clear from the governor's first press release that the State Department was about to do something. So the idea of giving it a little bit of time for the department and the legislature and the governor to work through what the framework is going to be. The idea of kind of a patchwork of different responses in different jurisdictions, I think, will make it harder. You'll probably get less compliance and harder to comply with the rules if it's so inconsistent between jurisdictions. So the idea of the initial kind of flurry of emergency orders that came out of Oakland County and Ingham County, and I think Washtenaw and Wayne actually did something too. That letting it settle a little bit here at the state level might be advisable, so that you're not putting things in place that you got to turn around and repeal a few days later.
Brian Calley with us. He's the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan, joining us this morning on the Oakland County Megacast. Brian, recently on a federal level, President Trump has said that he's encouraging members of Congress to suspend further negotiations on a second supplemental aid package related to COVID-19 until after the election. What are your thoughts on that second supplemental in terms of how much is needed for small businesses in the state of Michigan, and what waiting until after the results of the election, waiting another month, could potentially have in terms of an impact on our state's business community?
Well, it has been very discouraging over the last few months. It seems to be that Republicans and Democrats in the House, Republicans, Democrats in the Senate, and the President and the Treasury all agree that a scaled back version of the Paycheck Protection Program to help the businesses most impacted by the pandemic receive another round of support. And unfortunately, that's been kind of mixed in with a whole bunch of other things that there isn't agreement on. And it's caused things to really significantly slow up. I know that the president followed up with some comments this morning, yesterday, breaking off talks, but saying, hey, here are a list of things that I think we can all agree on. Let's just get those done now. One of those things was Paycheck Protection Program. I'm hopeful that there would be a willingness to consider that. I mean, it really, if everybody I talk to on both sides of the aisle seems to agree on that point. It wouldn't be as big as the first one. We know that some businesses have recovered really nicely, but some that have had to remain closed for a very long period of time or have limited capacities are more severely impacted. And helping those seems to be something everybody agrees on, but it's frustrating because it keeps on getting mixed in with a bunch of other things that there isn't agreement on. And it really puts a lot more of the small businesses at risk of survival, frankly, for no good reason. It's, the idea that everything gets so knotted up in Washington is frustrating for regular people, that are just trying to get by and make things happen and survive the pandemic.
Yeah, because while our elected leaders are trying to iron out the differences, they're still having to pay that light bill, pay that mortgage, or their rent. What are you telling some of the small businesses here in the state of Michigan?
Well, we continue advocacy, and we think that it's one thing for our association to advocate, but to really to harness the real power behind small business, it requires small business owners to also pile on and just create more pressure. So having them engaged and setting expectations and saying, okay, across this political spectrum, everybody says they support small business. So one thing that's been kind of incredible. I've never heard anybody say they don't support small business. Now is the time to prove it. Now is the time to say, okay, then we got this thing that everybody seems to agree on. We're just going to let that happen. We're not going to try to use it as, we're not going to try and leverage small businesses in order to deal with unrelated things. Just help them because they're so important to our communities, and their survival makes a big difference. It's great to see manufacturing has come on strong, and a lot of them are back up at full capacity or even more than what they were before. That's fantastic. But when it comes to a lot of smaller businesses like restaurants and hospitality business, and those that are in the in entertainment and businesses that happen around gatherings, even a lot of retail that depends on office worker traffic, which is not back robustly now, all those types of businesses, they're frankly still at a point of just hanging on by a thread. They really can't afford to wait any longer.
Brian Calley, he's the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan. And with that, with some of these small businesses, as you mentioned, while some have been able to come back and pivot and make changes, and in some ways become stronger than what they were before the crisis, there are, I would imagine, hundreds, if not thousands, of other ones that are still taking it day by day, week by week. How do you keep them hopeful that this is going to come to an end, and that is it worth it for them to try to stay open?
Unfortunately, every day that passes, more and more businesses do decide that it's not a matter of whether it's worth it or not. They just can't do it anymore. They've run out of resources at their end of their ability to make it go. And so bringing them into, the advocacy effort and demanding that action happen is one avenue that is available, but it's also in a lot of cases, entrepreneurs are figuring out what they have to do to survive, and in some cases that means pivoting into other types of business lines. In other cases, it means just figuring out how to fit within the context of a world that has dramatically changed. But there are some that just the nature of the pandemic that we face today makes it so their old business model just flat out doesn't work anymore. If you have a restaurant downtown Detroit, for example, where there are tens of thousands of office workers that are not going into the office every day, the fact that they're allowed to open, well, that's great, but their customers aren't back at work, and so a business like that faces an extraordinary amount of challenge because the world around them changed so much that I really do hope policymakers can zero in on those most affected and realize that when we lose a whole generation of entrepreneurs, that we'll be feeling the ramifications of that for many years to come.
And on top of that, I will say, I drive down the street right now and you see help wanted signs at just about every single business, whether it's a retail, a restaurant, a landscaping company. So there is work out there. However, it is often the lowest paying jobs. Those are the jobs that these businesses need to fill, but yet employees still aren't comfortable with coming back to working in the general population. Is there going to be a solution for that anytime soon?
Well, there is a lot of help wanted signs out there, and we are hearing from a lot of different lines of business, and frankly across a lot of different skill sets, so not just lower paying jobs, but having a hard time finding people. And at the same time, we've got close to what I think maybe 850,000 people on unemployment right now. So I think it is important to start really changing the dialogue. Before was the only way to stay safe is to stay home, but workplaces, I think it's fair for somebody applying for a job to interview the person that's hiring them about what are your workplace safety procedures and protocols. Are you following the rules that are required to keep workers safe? And so I think that will become kind of almost like a marketing tool, if you will, for employers to use to attract employees to say, hey, we're going to keep you safe. We've got the type of work environment that has all the protocols to make sure that you can work in an environment that is not going to cause you any risk or harm. And so I think that part hasn't necessarily matured yet, where people are really using that as a leading indicator. Hey, we've got this job available. We need people in here to work. And by the way, we take very seriously our responsibility to keep you healthy and safe while you're working for us. But I think that's employers that are being proactive about that are finding that it's making a difference.
I know there has been legislation making its way through Lansing about the liability for some of these businesses when it comes to COVID-19. Where do things stand in that arena, and what are you telling your members? Is this something that you want to see passed?
We definitely want to see the liability landscape better defined. This is a point of both insecurity and also just uncertainty. Nothing will throw a wet blanket on economic activity like uncertainty will. And so to the extent that legislation can be put in place that says, hey, businesses, if you follow the rules and protocols, then you have certain presumptions, certain protections from frivolous lawsuits. That would be, I think that would be a really positive thing. So we're hopeful as we see that legislation make its way. It went from the House to the Senate. We know that the governor is skeptical about it. She told me directly as much. But we think that this is an important factor. It's one factor, just one factor, but an important factor in creating an environment where just the normal risk-taking activities of entrepreneurs is more likely to come back in a way that builds opportunity and jobs and just all the good things that small businesses bring to local communities.
Brian Calley with us. He is the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan, with us today on the Oakland County Megacast. Brian, just a few more minutes with you today before we have to let you go. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed that would be important for our audience to know, or anything else that you want our audience to know about what the Small Business Association of Michigan is doing at this moment in time?
Well, we have put the entire team, all 26 of us on staff, are focused on the pandemic response and ensuring that we have the most up-to-date information available about what is required and what is recommended. We don't beat around the bush with this stuff. If it's uncertain, we'll say it's uncertain, but it doesn't stop us from giving interim advice in what to do. So I would invite people to check out sbam.org, sbam.org. We're an open platform. It's not just for members. We've taken on it as a mission to help all small businesses during this time, whether they're members or not. And we'd just love to engage with and get ideas and get feedback because from as many small businesses as possible, we've got almost 30,000 members, but it's an important feedback loop where how things are going, how the rules are impacting, and what needs to change between us and all levels of government is continuous, and we really, the more that we have on the same as part of that process, the better off we do long term. So it's just an open invitation. Please engage with us. You need help with something, please reach out.
Another question for you, because speaking with some of the business owners here in the greater West Bloomfield area with the confusion about these orders, so now that the health department is going to be issuing these orders, who is in charge of enforcing them? So if I'm a small business, I'm a restaurant owner, someone walks through my door, who am I looking for? Am I looking for the local health inspector, the local police department, or, the state department? Who should I be looking out for that's in charge of enforcing these local and state health orders?
That's a good question. Technically, any law enforcement officer can enforce, although I think that local law enforcement officers are going to, they're going to hesitate until things are more clear on what the rules are and where the authorities lie. But clearly, a business owner can still set the rules for their business. So just because there's some question about the efficacy of mask requirements doesn't mean that a business still can't require it on their location. If somebody does not comply with that, then they're on your property without your permission, and that's called trespassing. So local law enforcement will respond to that. So the idea of still setting rules and standards and guidelines at your place of business, you still get to do that. And all law enforcement, I'm confident, will help with that. But when it comes to the individual who's not complying with a health order, the local health department might be an option. Local law enforcement is clearly, I'll use the term deputized somewhat loosely, but in that emergency order. But then I expect on bigger violations, you see the Attorney General's office get involved sometimes, but what I expect over the next couple of days to happen is MIOSHA will come out with workplace safety rules. So they've never really promulgated rules around the general duty provisions to provide a safe work environment that employers have. They haven't promulgated rules, and they've been relying just on the executive orders for that. I expect the next few days they will promulgate rules now. And those will very likely be enforceable rules by the MIOSHA staff, the inspectors. So that's yet to come. I'm speculating a little bit, but I'm usually right about my speculations.
Well, you are a person with connections. I will say, I guess if you're a business owner, just do more of what's required and you'll be covered and you'll be safe. Before we let you go, you come from politics, you have experience in politics. Now, with the Supreme Court ruling here, doing away with the executive orders, do you think our politicians are going to be able to come together now and make some of these decisions that are going to be required and do it in a fashion that is respectful and timely and to which could satisfy the general public?
That's the question of the day. I've been involved in politics for now about 14 years. I've never seen the relationship between, particularly the Senate Majority Leader and the governor, as bad as it is now. And keep in mind, I was a freshman legislator during the Jennifer Granholm, Mike Bishop years, and they seem like best friends to me compared to what I see happening now. So that's so I think that is the main question of the day. What my experience, though, is that in the legislative and then executive branch process, that things don't happen until they have to happen, and so now with the executive orders taken out, the idea that of working together, trying to find some common ground on pandemic management issues, it's more likely to happen now because it's the environment requires something to be done. How timely that'll be, open question. But I'm hopeful. I mean, if there's one thing that I think we could use is tone down the heat a little bit in the rhetoric, and sometimes it helps to take the principles out and have some of the staff work up a few concepts, let the temperature settle down a few degrees, and then get back to work after that. But they got to come back to the table.
Oh, we all need that. I always say when you lose focus, go out and start talking to the regular people who are on the front lines directly impacted, and it will humble you and shape your focus again. Thank you so much, Brian Calley, with us on the Oakland County MegaCast. He is the president of the Small Business Association of Michigan. Always great to have you on our show, sharing your insight and your wisdom. We appreciate your time.
Pleasure to be with you anytime. Thank you.